When the team does something wrong, leaders step forward and take the responsibility. It sounds noble, but there's real science behind why this works, and there are predictable reasons why leaders struggle with it.
In every success, name names, specifically and publicly. Don't say my team succeeded. Say Sarah designed the process. Mark solved the bottleneck. Alicia kept us on schedule. Whatever it is, give the credit where credit is due. Welcome to Science Leadership, where we explore leadership both practically and scientifically. What makes great leadership, why those things matter, and how we can do them well. Those are the questions we tackle through thoughtful conversation, real-world experience, and science. I'm Tom Collins. I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Hamrick. We're thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today's conversation is one you can't afford to miss. Great leaders give the credit and take the blame. This is a principle that has come up over and over in my scientific studies and in many conversations with guests we've had on the podcast. So today, we're diving into this principle head on.
This is one of those deceptively simple ideas that separates high-trust leaders from everyone else. If you do it consistently, people walk through walls for you. So here's the big idea for today's episode. When a team succeeds, leaders shine the spotlight outward. When the team does something wrong, leaders step forward and take the responsibility. It sounds noble, but there's real science behind why this works, and there are predictable reasons why leaders struggle with it.
We'll break down what it looks like in practice, why it changes team dynamics, how it influences motivation and psychological safety, and how leaders can build this habit even in high-stakes environments. And sadly, if we look around organizations and especially in our government, we see the antithesis of it. So often, people in leadership positions today are the first to take the credit and give the blame. And that's a recipe for disaster.
So let's start how we always start on this. What? Let's define what we're talking about. Let's start simple. What do we actually mean by give the credit and take the blame? What does it look like in a real organization in real life?
Well, at a basic level, it's this idea of when something goes right, you say they did it. When something goes wrong, you say that's on me. That's the clean version of it, I would say. Let me fill that out a little bit. When something goes well, when there's a big success or a win, even if you actually are the one who made the winning shot or discovered cold fusion or brokered the agreement for world peace, real leaders give the credit to others, to their team, to all the people behind the scenes who made it happen. Conversely, when something goes poorly, even though you may have not been directly involved in the decision or the actions that led to that failure, great leaders step forward and take the blame. Because at the end of the day, and this is really important, it's the leader who hired the wrong person, didn't adequately train the right person, or didn't clearly communicate what it needed to be accomplished. And so that's on the leader, either way you go.
I think that's an important point because I think there's people that could listen and be like, that's false humility. You didn't actually do the problem. You didn't actually cause the problem. You were outside. But it gets to the core of what it is. The leader is responsible for the team. The opportunity to do this well or totally blow it happens every day, multiple dozens of ways. Who gets recognition in a meeting, whose name is on the email, who gets copied on a victory announcement, and who gets defended when something misfires. There's so many opportunities, both small and big, not in huge announcements, like you say, in a small email, to deflect, I guess, the compliments, but also to accept the blame.
Exactly. We have untold, really, I think, opportunities to do this right every day or to do it wrong every day. But when we don't, nothing can ruin trust faster. Let's say you have a leader. You do something that they told you to do, and that misfires. Something goes wrong. They told you to do it, but they point the finger at you. You know immediately you can't trust that person. They're not going to have your back. They're doing whatever's best, most expedient for them. And that's what we would say colloquial is tossing you under the bus, right?
Yep. I'm struck by just how this reflects what we've tried to go through in so many of our podcasts of what it means to be a team. A leader of a team, like you want to hold up a huge example of this. This is what it is. The leader is responsible for the team, and they show the accomplishments of the team and take the missteps or the faults. So let's talk examples. Do we have any historical or personal examples of this getting done right? Or we can really point to somebody or something or some example where like, that is exactly what we're talking about. This is the behavior.
Yeah. And so for our listeners, as we're going through this, contrast what I'm about to talk about against what we're seeing across society right now. Okay. But there are lots of examples. I could cite Abraham Lincoln, going before Congress and saying that failures were his fault, or so forth and so on. But one that really comes to mind immediately for me is General Dwight Eisenhower when he was in his role as Supreme Allied Commander of Europe in in preparation for Operation Overlord, or the D-Day invasion, at Normandy. Without getting into too much of the history really surrounding the invasion, there was so much that could have gone wrong. Okay, this was the largest single invasion in human history, amphibious or otherwise. The weather in the English Channel is so unpredictable, and this is 1944. They couldn't dial up the Weather Channel. They didn't have satellites and radar and all that, to be able to Doppler to figure out all this stuff. And so their information was very limited, and they only had a small window to get it right. And again, you're moving huge amounts of personnel, equipment, and so forth in a very short time window. And so the decision of whether to proceed had to be made in the absence of any accurate forecasting. Okay, so think of all the excuses that could come from that, right? And this was to be the decisive operation in the European theater in World War II. And again, incalculable points of failure. And what could that translate to? Yet, late in the evening of June 5th, so the day before what we now call D-Day, 1944, General Eisenhower sat down at his desk and he wrote 2 letters. And we'll put a link in the description to the National Archives where they actually have these so you can see them for yourselves. But the first letter was one eventually that was published, praising the troops for their courage, devotion to duty, and their skill in battle. And that letter went on to be circulated around the world after the success of the invasion. But the second letter, and again, it's in the archives and it's handwritten, you can see it, his signature, date, the whole deal. It was much different. That letter was to be released to the press if the invasion failed. And when the operation was a success, General Eisenhower tossed it in the trash. But his aide retrieved it. And now it sits in our National Archives. And in the letter, Eisenhower wrote, and I'm quoting this, "Our landings in the Cherbourg-Havre area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based on the best information available. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." So with all the incalculable ways that enormous operation could have failed, and with it, honestly, a completely different outcome for human history, Eisenhower was prepared to say, we could even argue that he effectively did say, he was the one to blame. So I think that's a profound example of this idea of, give the credit, take the blame.
That's a huge comparison. Like, in both of those examples, both of those letters, the team gets praised. The team in the first one gets praised for the result. In the second one, they get praised for their role in it, even though it was a failure. But the blame is, and he could have blamed, well, I didn't get the right information. This person, gave me information that was untrue. Like, that's the only time it seems in those 2 examples where he says I, was when it was like, it went wrong. I did that. I did that. And that is a real contrast to a lot of examples I think I see. And I've, even had examples where I'm at fault in this, where you see something go really right and you want to sort of get in that spotlight of, oh, I had something to do with it. I did this too, instead of really using it as a chance to advance your team. Not falsely, not giving them credit for something they weren't involved in, but really giving that. I'm just trying to imagine how to bring it down to something our listeners can relate to. Do you have an example that's on a smaller scale that doesn't deal with D-Day or Normandy invasion, but like something that you're like, this is something happens every day, everybody can sort of relate to?
Sure, yeah. That one's just, you're right. The magnitude of it is so tremendous. There isn't gonna be anybody out there listening who's gonna be in that particular situation, clearly. But yes, I have plenty of examples, in fact. So you and I, as academic subspecialists, have both been and had the opportunity to work with physicians in training, whether those are medical students, residents, or fellows. And so for all our listeners who are not in medicine, basically people who are either in medical school or have finished medical school or are now specializing, Justin and I and other people like us help them to continue to develop, grow, learn, and become the physicians and specialists that they're seeking to become. So we play an intimate role in that. And so to learn how to be excellent physicians, those trainees must be given the opportunity to make decisions and to make mistakes within boundaries. When I'm working with a trainee, Typically, I explain my expectations, set up the guardrails, and then let them maneuver within those. There are different ways that people might go about approaching a decision. I will let them make that decision as long as it's not outside of something reasonable and within, you know, the scope of standard of care. Some people are not like that, right? They micromanage, but I'll give them the room to do that because I think that's vitally important for their development. And there are many such episodes over the years that I can think of where I've done that, had the opportunity to do that. But one example is when I was working with really an excellent cardiology fellow, and she was so strong clinically that sometimes she had the tendency to come off as cocky, and some of the other attending physicians didn't really appreciate her as much. And frankly, I think that's because she was so good, she exposed their deficits and made them look bad, but they didn't like her as much. And she and I worked very well together, and I gave her a lot of leash when it came to making decisions. And we had a patient on our service one time, and she had made a decision to alter the management a bit. And sometime a little later, the patient had an event that required being transferred to the ICU. And this was the primary patient of another cardiologist who had a pretty big ego. And he stormed into the ward, into the workroom to berate the fellow's decision. A decision that was soundly based in the literature and scientific evidence and standard of care and so on. But anyway, he storms in to the workroom and he started to just unload in front of the whole team. And I stopped him from that. And I told him I was the one to blame for the decision because the fellow and I had discussed it and I'd agreed with the plan. So if he had a problem, that was me. And so his anger then diverted from the fellow and was directed at me and diffused rather quickly. And after that, not only the fellow, but everyone else in that workroom, a nurse, a couple physician assistants, a couple residents, maybe a medical student, they knew, they saw, and everybody in that room and beyond, because you know how it works, right? Knew that I had their back, knew that I would stand up for them. And it made a tremendous impact in the team.
Hmm. Those, yeah, can't be undersold. That foxhole mentality of, at the end of the day, you want a leader that you'll be in a foxhole with, that you trust, that trusts you, and within the bounds will protect you and protect the team. Because it's not that they love you personally, it's that their ultimate goal is the advancement of the team and the success of those people on it.
Let me pause here for a second and remind our listeners that my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and essentially all online outlets. It's getting rave reviews, and I'm certain you will find it not only informative, but also inspiring. So I hope you'll order your copy today. Now let's get back to this interesting conversation.
We've talked about the what. So now let's go to where we always go. So what? Why does it matter? So we define the idea. So let's get into why giving credit and owning blame, owning failures matters so much for the concept, character, and the things we always talk about leadership.
Yeah, so I can give you 3 big reasons that it's so important. First, trust. We kind of hit on that in the last story I told. Motivation and then psychological safety. Those are the 3 big ones.
And we see each in the research, but let's take them one at a time.
Yeah. So number 1, trust. Okay. We talked about trust a number of podcasts, but trust increases when leaders give credit. So studies on leader humility, there was one that was done in 2012 by Owens and Heckman, but others have shown similar things. They show that leaders who acknowledge contributions from others are rated as more trustworthy, more ethical, and more effective. So when you give credit, you're seen as more trustworthy, ethical, and effective.
Effective. That's really interesting. That they're rated not only the trustworthy. I can get ethical. Okay, they don't take credit, but the effectiveness. They're actually rated as more effective leaders. That's huge.
Yeah, and I think we can make the tie there, right? Because if people trust you and they believe that you're going to do the right thing, then when you ask them to do something, they're going to work harder for you, right? They're going to do more to that end, and the effectiveness is their performance, right? And then you look like a champ because they're doing a great job, right? You're not impeding their performance. So, yeah, so that's the first one. Number 2, taking responsibility reduces fear and increases learning. So we've talked about the work of Amy Edmondson countless times on the podcast, but there was a meta-analysis recently that looked at a bunch of studies on psychological safety, and Santos and colleagues did this and just published it this year. And they showed that when leaders take responsibility for their mistakes, it increases psychological safety and, again, performance among the team. So a similar sort of finding there. The third one Recognition fuels motivation and effort. Research by Ovolio and colleagues demonstrates that public and private recognition strengthens intrinsic motivation and team cohesion, which directly boosts performance. Number 4, leader blame taking, so owning it, promotes resilience and long-term performance among the team. A study in the Leadership Quarterly by Hannah and colleagues show that leaders who accept responsibility for failures create team cultures with higher adaptability and lower defensiveness. So that's some of the evidence that's out there.
That's huge. Especially the last one, I think it gets to the core of what it means to be a leader. It's not this fault. It's like, oh, that was my fault. When you might not have been directly responsible, but your true belief is I'm the leader. These are my people. This is my team. I'm the head coach. This is ultimately falls on me. Like you said, I put the team together. I gave them the parameters, the boundaries to work within. That really gets to the core of what we talked about in many episodes of what it means to be a leader. So what does this mean for leaders? I'm curious, in your interviews for the book, all these four-star generals and admirals, this sounds like, especially with your example about D-Day, something that really can apply to that area of society. How did they talk about this principle of blame, owning successes, things like that?
Yeah, so this idea of giving credit and taking the blame was almost universal among the 4 stars. They talked about the idea with regard to building trust, empowering their people, and simply doing the right thing. They saw it as
Hmm.
it's the right thing to do. Additionally, there was the reality that if your people don't feel safe making mistakes, you'll never hear about the small ones, only the really big ones. Only when it's too late will you hear about mistakes. So that was another significant component of this. So for the 4 stars, giving credit wasn't just giving credit and taking the blame wasn't just a moral thing. It was strategic. It was setting the parameters so that your people perform better, you're aware of where the problems lie, and you can correct those things and be so much more effective.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, giving credit publicly multiplies motivation. I mean, it doesn't give people fear of bringing, like you said, the small issues to you. Like, if every time something doesn't go as planned and they get scolded for it, they get blamed rather than the leader taking ownership, the natural human tendency is going to be to not bring those forward. Well, the leader doesn't really need to know about this. And so you create these circles that you're separate from the team. You're not actually a part of it. And like you said, you don't know about things on your own team until they become problems that can't be hidden.
Right. When people feel like their leader will highlight their contributions, they'll take bigger swings, right? Like
Mm,
they feel the safety to make a mistake, but it's only in those places where you have an opportunity to make mistakes that you can have the opportunity to really make a huge impact too, right? So they bring more ideas, they put things out there. There's less self-protection and more initiative. Studies have shown there's increased innovation in those sorts of environments and organizational cultures. So it really is this tremendous win-win potential that I think is just it's hard to beat, really. Justin, I'm curious if you have a story from your experience where leaders giving credit and taking blame made the difference in how that team functioned.
yeah, sort of a personal example goes to similar to what you've mentioned previously. So, for those not in medicine or academics, it's a big deal to be sort of what they call a senior author on papers, and that's usually the person whose name is last. That's a really, really big deal. Like that, sort of how people get promoted, how people get recognized, things like that. I worked in a lab before, and we worked near another lab, and the person I worked for, very, very accomplished, very well known, but he made it a point to usually keep himself off or in the middle of those type of papers. He was always looking for people in his team to get that position of authority or that accolade, being the senior author on a paper. He routinely really sacrificed and put his name on the paper, usually somewhere in the middle, which is the lesser area of importance for those. I realized how much it shaped our group, our team, and those people who left continued to practice that. They saw that method of leadership, and that's what they practiced in their own careers as they went forward. And I contrast that to another lab my other friend had worked in, where even though the person whose lab it was in the same sort of area of life, probably similarly accomplished, they always were the senior author. on papers coming out of their lab. And it just created a different culture. And it's interesting, those two contrasts. And what happened is that sort of propagated because the people who left that lab or that research group thought that that was how you were as a leader. So it was interesting, like that propagated itself because of how people were sort of taught.
Yeah, it shows the impact of leadership behaviors, how we're role models to those that we lead in so many ways. And when we do things right, we can propagate that. And we choose to do things a different way, that propagates too. So it's contagious.
Hmm. Yeah. So now we get to the part where we always like to get to for our listeners. It's like we defined it. Why does it matter? But now what do we do with it? Like we've hopefully convinced everyone it's important. But on Monday morning, when we walk to our jobs or to our families or to whatever group we have impact on, what do we do on Monday morning? How do we practically apply this strategy and do it well? We've shown examples of how to do it well, how to not do it well, but how can we put this into practice? Not for a false sense of humility, but to really demonstrate what we believe leaders are, which are leaders of a team to advance that team.
Yeah. So, and think about this, we got 4 actionable practices I think that we can activate on to do this well. 1, in every success, name names specifically and publicly. Don't say my team succeeded.
Hmm.
Say Sarah designed the process. Mark solved the bottleneck. Alicia kept us on schedule. Whatever it is, specifically give the credit where credit is due. These people did, and try to spread that all around. Some additional data studies have shown that if you only acknowledge 1 or 2 people all the time, that can create infighting, that can create competition.
Hmm.
So if you can, as much as possible, give praise to everybody, but specifically, that will do you so much better. That will help your team so much more. Number 2, when failures happen, notice I said when, not if, but when failures happen, step forward immediately. Before anyone points any fingers, say, this is on me. That disarms the defensiveness. It centers the conversation on solutions. That happened. It's on me. Let's figure out how to fix it. Let's move forward. That'll diffuse a lot of the issues. Number 3, redirect praise toward others, outward, away from yourself. When someone praises you, respond with, the team drove this. Let me tell you how. You train people to see success as collective when you do that sort of thing. And that, again, propagates. Number 4, build a culture of shared responsibility. Model taking the blame, but also teach your team how to analyze errors without shame. And I think if we do those things, that definitely will help us give credit and take the blame.
Listening to those things, and those things really create a culture of what we're trying to get to. But here's our signature question. What's the one thing leaders can do today to get better at giving credit and taking blame? That's what we always talk about. How can I be better tomorrow? Definitely agree with those 3 things you pointed out, but what's the one thing that'll make us better tomorrow than we are today?
I think it's really important to slow down in those moments of success and ask yourself, who actually made this happen? Who really is responsible? If you're honest with yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, you know that it was your team. You know that it was other people that are doing it. You may be the person in the limelight, but you know that it was them. And remember that. Ask that question. And then when something goes wrong, ask, what was my role in this? How could I have been better prepared, supported my team, or guided my team? That shift in mindset will transform your behavior. So I think
Mm.
those are you asked for 1, but those are 2 things. Slow down in those moments, ask who really made it happen, and then what's my role in it? What did I really do or fail to do that would have changed it?
I think that's one of the biggest things that we've talked about in all this podcast is the difference between that and what I would say false humility. Because I think people would be like, well, so am I just supposed to make up people that contributed to it? And that's not it. It is a shift in mindset that ultimately the team, your assembly of it, is the reason why the team is succeeding. If there is any failures or failure to succeed, that as a leader, it's on you. It's on your shoulder. And how can I, as a leader, get better from that? And that's a great takeaway and a great way to end this amazing discussion.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.